Hello, it's Molly Reamer with Bridget's Grove in 30 Days of Goddess, and I wanted to talk to you briefly about the power of the middle of ritual, the middle of ceremony, the working phase of ritual. So I have been a priestess since 2012. I have held rituals and ceremonies since 2008, and one of the things that I find is most often neglected in books about ritual and ceremony or outlines for ritual and ceremony, and then actually in physical practice in settings that I have experienced with other people leading, particularly if there's a public component, like let's say a ritual at a pagan pride event or something that's kind of trying to appeal to a public walk-in type of audience rather than like a small dedicated group. The most common element that I find that is missing is the working phase at the center. It's missing a middle. So a ritual, a good ritual, a healthy ritual, a strong ritual, a powerful ritual, a ritual that does real magic has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I find that too often the middle is ignored, overlooked, or neglected. And I would venture to say that a good ritual with the beginning, middle, or the end also still comes into play kind of in miniature form, even with your own small daily practices, even with your own private rituals and ceremonies, even in a small circle with your own kids. It still needs a beginning, a middle, and an end to be powerful. So the middle is the working phase. This is when the magic happens. This is when something is happening. So many people are very good at kind of creating the opening stage, the beginning, the calling on the elements, inviting in the directions, perhaps drumming or singing or raising energy at the beginning. And then they can be relatively good at letting that go, releasing the energy, releasing the directions, and closing the ritual. But in the middle, sometimes there's this gap of what's supposed to be happening now. Like, what are we actually doing? What is the purpose of this ritual? What is the purpose of ceremony? What is the magical work that's happening in the container that we have carefully created? And so I am the type of priestess, ritualist, ceremonialist person who I do not find that there has to be a right answer or formula for what you do. So it's not, magic is not a cookbook to me. It's not about having a red candle and having, the right symbols in every direction. You can have a beautiful, powerful, impactful ritual without ever actually calling on the directions. This is where I differ sometimes between people from a straight up pagan tradition and people from a goddess-centered magical perspective, is that when we have a kind of straight up pagan persuasion, there tends to be kind of a formula for ritual that involves invoking the directions, calling on, the guardians of the east, the guardians of the north, that kind of thing. And sometimes setting up altar spaces that reflect those elements. So I know how to do that. And I do that particularly if we have larger retreats or rituals. I will set up an altar in the east with the yellow and the symbols for air and things like that, and have a altar guardian who invokes that direction. But in primary practice, I find that we can just as powerfully, perhaps even more powerfully, cast the circle just with our hands and with our breath and with our voices, without the need to perhaps go through the motions of the correct way to do it. And so most often when I'm with a small group, we will join hands. I lead the people very briefly through kind of a centering meditation that's just spontaneous. It's just something I come up with on the spot. Taking deep breaths, feeling ourselves come into our bodies, into this time, into this place right now. And then we usually hum together, and that creates this kind of opening to the beginning to the ritual, where and people differ in whether they say opening or closing as well. So they will say that is about, casting the circle, and then you open the circle at the end. So I still look at it as it's the beginning of the ritual. It's opening the ritual, as in starting the ritual. And so then we hum together 3 times, and that really settles us back in our bodies and literally brings us into resonance with one another. Because the humming, you're actually tuning up with the other person. So that's what we do. And then we sing. And sometimes I will have like a ritual oil or spray, and we will do a little cleansing spritz of each other with maybe a little blessing. It depends on how fancy I'm feeling. We'll do a little blessing or something. But the basic start is the holding hands, the breathing together, and the humming together. We don't invoke the east and turn to the north. Those are like kind of for other maybe larger, more seasonal rituals will do those elements. But that starting point can cast the circle, can create the container very powerfully, very richly, and very centered in the body. And so this is what I was talking about. What I find is that some ritual outlines or ceremonialists at other events will then kind of go straight from that point, the casting the circle, the invoking the guardians, straight to maybe they'll do some kind of call and response, and then they kind of move straight to closing. And I'm left feeling like, where's the middle? Like, what's supposed to happen now? Something's supposed to happen in the center. And so in the center is like where everything is born. Like, that's where everything is made. That's where the magic happens. And so you always have to have something happening inside. So once you've cast the circle, like, what's happening in there? What are you doing in the center? That really matters. So for example, yesterday I was having a small circle, and in the middle we did a Tree of Life visualization. We worked with pendulums. We talked about energy and aura sensing. We sang. We did another type of meditation energy work where we laid on the ground with our heads facing together, or heads not facing together, heads head to head, and then put our hands on one another's bellies. And then we did like a toning and sound, kind of a trance sound thing. And then we grounded that raising of energy, and then we closed by holding hands and singing another song together. And so there's a beginning, a middle, and end. Something's happening in the middle. With a daily practice, with a personal private ritual, you will do something, or I find that I do something like I come out, I sit down, I look around, kind of greeting what's there. I have a prayer that I repeat. I will sometimes sing. Then I write in my prayer book, and that's kind of becomes the heart. That's the center of the personal ceremony that time. The center is the writing and the observing and the seeing what's there, noticing what birds there are, noticing the little skink crawling across the deck, noticing the colors of leaves, noticing the way the sunlight's coming through. That's kind of the middle. I write. And then I usually stand up, and sometimes I have another prayer or affirmation that I offer, but I often just kiss my hand to the sun, and I'll put my hand on my forehead, on my heart, and on my belly. Sometimes I'll say thank you. Sometimes I tip my head back to the sky. I'll lift my arms up. Something happens, and that's the end. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So what I'm wanting to emphasize here is don't rush from raising energy, building energy, invoking energy to finishing. Do something in the middle. Something has to happen in the middle. And your rituals, your retreats, your workings will be much more powerful if you pay attention to what's actually happening in the container that you created. So the real point of this video is to say, don't get so caught up in the right way to create the container that you forget to actually do something inside of the container. So for example, on the fall equinox with my kids, we all came out to the back porch in the dark. We circle up, we do our hands, we have a song that we sing, and then we had acorns, which we infused with the next goal for the final quarter of the year. We had apples that we passed to one another and had kind of an apple communion where we said, like, this is the fruit of your life. It is sweet. It is good. Taste of it. It is good. It is right. And then we ate our apples, and then we cast out our acorns to like grow our wishes, and we cast a little bit of our apple out in gratitude, and then we sang again and held hands, and that like finishes it out. So beginning, middle, and end. It's very important. The magic that happens in the middle is what it's all about. So creating a container, so very important, but actually doing something in that container is also important in terms of harnessing the power of what you're even trying to do in a ritual or ceremonial context, and then having that actually happen and be born into the world. So thanks so much for being here and for watching, and I hope that was helpful.